Before there were stars, seas, or soil under your feet, there was a kingdom of pure light. And in that kingdom, before a single human was born, a war of loyalty had already begun. Among those countless servants was one unlike the rest, brilliant, gifted, trusted to stand near the throne. Heaven knew him as a guardian, clothed in beauty and wisdom. We would come to know him by another name. One day, admiration twisted into ambition. The guardian looked at the throne, then at himself, and a thought rose that heaven had never heard before. Why should I serve when I could be worshipped? Pride never stays alone. It whispered through the ranks, "You deserve more, you are strong, you are forgotten." And angel by angel, a third of heaven's army began to bend toward rebellion. Then came the moment no one imagined. In a place built for praise, swords were drawn. The creature who was meant to guard the throne now marched against it, and heaven itself became a battlefield. But this was not a war of equals. The Creator does not struggle for his own throne. In a single decree, the rebel and his followers were cast out, ripped from glory, hurled toward a world not yet scarred. Cast down, but not destroyed, the fallen guardian rose from the dust. His glory was twisted, his purpose corrupted, but his ambition remained. If he could not rule heaven, he would try to rule those made in God's image. Into this war zone, God planted something completely different, a garden of peace, beauty, and innocence. In the middle of a fallen world, Eden was like a living declaration. I still choose to love. The enemy watched the garden like a hunter watching a gate. He could not touch God, so he aimed for God's children, slipping into Eden in a form that could get close without alarming them. With one question, did God really say? Lucifer pierced the human heart, desire over truth, pride over trust. One bite of forbidden fruit, and the war that began in heaven exploded inside the human race. The war inside Eden could not stay inside Eden. The ground that once welcomed their bare feet now cut them with thorns. Behind them burned the gate of paradise. Ahead of them stretched a world that would feel every scar of their choice. Outside the garden, worship did not stop, but it divided. Abel brought his best with a broken heart. Cain brought something with a clenched heart. On two simple altars, heaven weighed more than offerings. It weighed motives. When God warned Cain, it was not poetry. Sin is crouching at the door, he said. Cain opened that door with his hands. In a lonely field, brother rose against brother, and Lucifer's whisper tasted human blood for the first time. Generations passed, and violence became the language of the earth. Cities rose without justice. Giants of reputation and power filled the stories. The line between man and monster blurred, until God himself said, "Every thought is only evil continually." God answered the corruption with a warning and a wooden ark. While the world laughed, one man built. When the fountains burst and the sky tore open, mocking mouths turned to screams. Judgment fell, but grace floated on the waves. When the waters fell, the world looked clean, but the human heart had not been washed away. The same serpent spirit stepped onto the new earth and began to trace a familiar plan: gather people, feed pride, and aim them at heaven without God. On the plains of Shinar, humanity united around a single dream. Let us make a name for ourselves. Let us reach the heavens. Bricks baked in human pride, mortar mixed with rebellion. Babel was not about height, it was about a heart that refused dependence. Then without sword or flood, God struck the tower where it was strongest, its unity. Words fractured in mid-sentence. Friends became strangers. Crews stopped mid-stone. The project died, not by force, but by confusion. While nations scattered, God chose one man quietly. No throne, no army, just a voice in the desert saying, "Leave your land. I will make you a nation." From that promise, the war narrowed. Lucifer now had a line to target. From that night on, the story tightened. One chosen family carrying a promise of blessing for all nations, and one furious enemy determined to cut that line. Every famine, every slavery, every slaughter of sons would now be part of Lucifer's war against the coming seed. On a lonely plain, God told Abraham to cut animals in two and wait. As darkness fell, a burning presence passed between the pieces. It was a vow carved in blood and fire. I will keep my promise, even if it costs me. Against all odds, the promised son arrived. Isaac's first cry cut through the desert silence like a verdict. God would not abandon his plan. Every laugh around that tent told Lucifer the same thing. The line is still alive. Years later, God asked for what he had given. Take your son. On Moriah's stones, Abraham lifted the knife. Lucifer watched, certain the promise was about to die. But the blade stopped, and a ram took the place. The pattern of substitution was born. Isaac's sons fought before they could speak. Jacob and Esau wrestled even in the womb, a picture of two nations colliding in one body. God chose the younger, and the older seethed, a new stage for the war inside a single family. Esau stumbled in from the field starving. Jacob held the bowl and named a price. In that moment, appetite outweighed destiny. The firstborn sold his birthright for stew, and Lucifer smiled as another human treated holiness like cheap food. Through trickery and tears, the blessing fell on Jacob. As Esau burned with rage, Jacob fled into the night. At Bethel, a ladder of glory split the sky above him, and God stamped a new name into history: Israel. From Jacob's many sons, one rose with dreams that reached too high for his brother's pride. They stripped Joseph's robe, threw him in a pit, and sold him like cargo. Another attempt to bleed, promise out through jealousy. Dragged in chains to Egypt, Joseph entered the empire that would one day swallow his whole family. What looked like a personal tragedy was a move in a larger war, God positioning a servant inside the future prison of his people. Years later, famine drove Jacob's whole house into Egypt seeking grain, and they stayed. New kings forgot Joseph. Chains replaced favor. The chosen line multiplied in a land that turned from refuge into prison. When Pharaoh saw their numbers grow, he reached for the darkest weapon. Every son, throw him into the river. The war narrowed to newborn throats. Lucifer's plan was simple: drown the promise before it learns to speak. Into a river of death, one desperate mother released a basket. While soldiers hunted Hebrew sons, the future deliverer floated past their spears, carried by the same waters meant to drown him. The boy the river could not claim was drawn out by a princess. Moses grew up under gold ceilings, trained in the wisdom of Egypt, raised in the very house he would one day confront. Years later, the prince became a fugitive shepherd. On a lonely mountain, a bush burned with fire that did not consume. The God of Abraham spoke from the flames and turned a runaway into a weapon. Moses walked back into the palace he fled, staff in hand, dust on his cloak. Before the most powerful king on earth, a shepherd spoke 7 words that shook an empire. "Let my people go," says the Lord. The plagues were not random disasters. They were direct strikes on Egypt's gods. The Nile bled, idols shattered, the sky rained fire. Each blow tore another mask off the powers this empire trusted instead of God. On the final night, judgment walked every street, but it passed over every door marked with blood. Inside those homes, families huddled around roasted lamb, listening to cries rise from the houses of those who refused the warning. Israel ran until the sea blocked their way. Behind them thundered chariots, in front uncrossable water. With dust in their lungs and death on both sides, God told them the one thing no army commander ever says: stand still. Moses lifted his staff, and the sea split like fabric. Walls of water rose on both sides, roaring but restrained. A slave nation walked a road no map had ever known. Dry ground in the heart of chaos. When the last Israelite stepped onto the far shore, the waters crashed back. Chariots, horses, armor, and shouts vanished in a single roar. The empire that tried to drown God's sons now choked on its own arrogance. At Sinai, the God who split the sea came down on a mountain of thunder. Fire crowned the peak. Smoke rolled like a furnace, and a trembling people stood below as the war's true terms were carved in stone. This is how a holy nation must live. While fire still burned on Sinai's peak, the camp below melted gold into a god. The people who heard God's own voice now danced around a statue and said, "This is your deliverer." Lucifer did not need Egypt's idols anymore. He had planted Egypt's heart inside Israel. Rebellion did not end with the calf. In the wilderness, complaints turned to curses against God. In answer, venomous serpents slid through the camp, biting ankles and throats. As people dropped in the dust, God offered a strange remedy: look up at a bronze serpent on a pole and live. When Israel finally crossed the Jordan, the first city waiting was Jericho, fortress of Canaanite gods. No siege towers, no battering rams, just priests with trumpets and a marching people circling stone. On the seventh day, walls that had mocked heaven for centuries collapsed under a shout. But conquering land is easier than conquering lust. Israel did not only tear down altars, they also learned from them. High places multiplied. Baal, Asherah, and forbidden feasts slipped into the calendar. The people called mixture culture. Heaven called it adultery. With no king and no steady obedience, the nation fell into a brutal rhythm. Sin, slavery, crying out, rescue, repeat. Judges rose like temporary fire breaks. Gideon, Deborah, Samson. But as soon as the flames were out, hearts ran back to the same idols. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Tired of unseen rule, Israel told Samuel, "Give us a king like the nations." It sounded reasonable. It was a quiet rejection of God as king. Lucifer's strategy shifted again. If he could not stop the kingdom, he would corrupt the kings. Saul began with humility and ended with rebellion. When God went silent, the king who once drove out sorcerers crept at night to a witch's house. The anointed leader of God's people now begged counsel from the very darkness he was called to destroy. Into Saul's failing kingdom stepped a shepherd boy with a sling. Goliath was more than a warrior. He was a monument to fear, draped in bronze and curses. When David ran toward him, it was not only a duel, it was hell's champion against the line that would one day bear the Messiah. Once David's line was chosen, the war narrowed even further. At one point, a queen named Athaliah tried to wipe out every royal son of Judah. Swords swept through nurseries and palaces until one tiny boy, Joash, was hidden in the temple for years, protected by priests and walls of prayer. After Solomon, the kingdom split like a cracked shield. 10 tribes in the north, 2 in the south. To keep his people from returning to Jerusalem, Jeroboam made golden calves and said, "These are your gods." The same sin from Sinai now stood at the very gates of Israel's future. In the north, a king named Ahab married Jezebel and rebuilt what Joshua had torn down. Altars to Baal rose in Israel's own capital. Prophets of the Lord were hunted like animals, while false prophets ate at the queen's table. Lucifer did not need foreign armies when he could sit inside the palace. God answered this throne with one man on a mountain. Elijah stood alone against hundreds of prophets of Baal and prayed a simple prayer. No tricks, no hidden fire, just a soaked altar and a heart that refused to bow. When flame fell from heaven, it burned not just wood and water. It burned away the lie that Baal could save. But victory on the mountain did not end the war. Jezebel's threat sent Elijah running into the desert, begging to die beneath a tree. In a cave on Horeb, God did not speak through quake or fire this time, but through a whisper, reminding his prophet that the battle is won not just with miracles, but with faithful survivors he has never met. The northern kingdom refused to turn. Prophet after prophet warned them, and they laughed. Then Assyria came, iron teeth and fire. Samaria's walls broke, altars toppled, and the 10 tribes were dragged away in chains. Lucifer had used foreign power to scatter a careless people like dust in the wind. Later, Assyria set its eyes on Judah. Sennacherib's commander mocked Jerusalem's walls and Israel's God. But Hezekiah and Isaiah took the threat into a prayer room instead of a war room. That night, without a single Judean arrow, an unseen hand passed through the enemy camp. By morning, the world's terror empire limped home in silence. Judah saw what happened to her sister and still would not listen. Jeremiah wept, preached, was beaten, thrown into a pit, and ignored. Babylon's armies finally surrounded Jerusalem, tore down her walls, burned the temple, and carried David's throne into exile. For a moment, it looked as if Lucifer had cut the promise off at the root. In Babylon, the war moved into royal halls and lion dens. Daniel and his friends refused the king's food, the king's idols, and the king's fear. They served pagan emperors without worshipping them. Dreams, statues, and beast visions pulled the curtain back. Behind every empire beast stood the same ancient rebel. Babylon fell, Persia rose. A remnant returned to rubble and rebuilt a smaller temple on tired shoulders. The prophets promised a coming king, but generations passed with no throne, no glory cloud. The battlefield grew quiet on the surface. Underneath, the serpent coiled for his boldest strike yet. When the promised child finally came, he did not arrive in a palace but in a stable. While angels sang over shepherds, Herod sharpened knives in his heart. Another decree went out: kill the boys in Bethlehem. Once again, Lucifer swung his sword at newborn throats, and once again, one baby slipped through, carried into the night. Before Jesus ever preached a sermon or healed a body, the Spirit led him into a desert to face the architect of this war alone. For 40 days, hunger clawed at his ribs, while Lucifer threw every weapon he knew: pleasure, pride, power. Where Adam fell in a garden full of fruit, Christ stood in a wilderness with empty hands and said, "It is written." At Golgotha, every line of the story converged. The serpent struck the heel of the promised seed, driving iron through flesh and wood. Rome thought it was an execution. Hell thought it was a victory. Heaven knew it was a trap, baited with the only weapon Satan had: death. When Jesus breathed, "It is finished," the war's outcome changed forever. The war is not over, but its end is written. Now the battlefield runs through every heart: temptation, accusation, oppression, and the armor is faith, truth, and the blood of the Lamb. One day, the dragon will make his final move and be chained forever. Heaven and earth will be remade without fear, without graves, without war. Until that day, you are not a spectator. You are a soldier under a king who has already broken the serpent's head.